appearance to comment on Nebraska education standards, and he will have 10 minutes. So, Mr. Burke, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Henry Burke. Good builders know the importance of building a structure on a sound foundation. If the foundation of the structure is weak, it will crumble and have a very short life. If the foundation is strong, the structure will last for many years. Whether it is a physical structure or the education standards document, the foundation is very important. If the foundation is wrong, everything that is built upon it is doomed to failure. Education standards play a central role in providing tangible goals for the schools. The school districts and teachers need a framework that is well planned and clear. With good knowledge-based standards, students will receive a high-quality education, test scores will improve, graduation rates will increase. Isn't that what we want for our Nebraska schools? The Nebraska Department of Education, NDE, is in the process of revising the education standards for English language, arts, and mathematics. When I checked the NDE website a few days ago, I was very disappointed. I discovered that the NDE is basing the new proposed 2014 standards on the flawed 2009 standards. Why do I say flawed standards? The 2009 standards are Type 2 standards, like Common Core. With those 2009 standards as a framework, as a foundation, no amount of revisions will make them right. When the NDE decided that the base document for the new proposed 2014 standards would be the 2009 standards, everything from that point on has been fruitless. The NDE needed to start with an exemplary set of standards and build them along the Type 1 educational philosophy. Build the new standards on a good foundation, and they will last for many years and produce good results. Very few state standards are truly exemplary. In order to have excellent state standards, they need to be explicit, knowledge-based, academic, clearly worded, grade level specific, and measurable. If state standards comply with these tenets, teachers will not have to second guess the standards writers. School districts will not need to hire expensive consultants to interpret the standards and write curriculum. They won't need to spend a lot of money for educational service units. It'll be readily apparent what is required for each and every grade. Experienced educators know that there are basically two philosophies of education, Type 1 and Type 2. Basically, Type 1 means the curriculum standards are traditional, classical, knowledge-based, academic. They emphasize back to the basics, core knowledge and skills that progress in difficulty and complexity from one grade level to the next. Type 1 standards are specific for each grade level. And finally, Type 1 standards can be tested through objective questions that have definite right or wrong answers. Because I have criticized the existing and proposed Nebraska standards, I believe it is important for me to offer some positive suggestions on how to do the job right. First, you need to start with exemplary Type 1 standards, in this case, English standards. At the November board meeting, I suggested that the board adopt the Texas ELAR standards, English Language Arts and Reading. At the February board meeting, I recommended that the board adopt the English Success Standards, again, Type 1 standards. These are excellent standards, and the work has already been done. The NDE should assemble a writing team of experienced classroom teachers and educators. Tell them that the final standards must be traditional, classical, Type 1 standards. Make sure they clearly understand the differences between Type 1 and Type 2. Focus on the 6 attributes of Type 1 standards. Again, standards must be explicit, knowledge-based, academic, clearly worded, grade level specific, and measurable. Do not let the writing team wander away from these basic tenets. For example, do not let the standards fall into the Type 2 trap, such as how the student feels about something or the student's opinion on an issue, personal beliefs, that sort of thing. Standards must be knowledge-based. Give the ELAR writing teams the two documents mentioned previously, the Texas TEKS and the English Success Standards. Encourage the writing team to go through those two documents and pull out standards that are applicable and recommended for Nebraska students. Constantly remind the writing team members to follow those 6 tenets of good standards. Check constantly to make sure that proper scope and sequence are being followed between grade levels and within a given grade level. If the NDE does all of these things, we can have great standards in Nebraska. I'm very frustrated with the NDE, quite frankly. It seems that some things never change at the department. In 1997, the NDE revised and updated the existing standards, and they have done the same thing during every revision cycle since. They persist on revising the existing standards rather than developing a first quality, top-notch set of Type 1 standards. I wrote 2 letters to the board in 2008. I'd like to reflect on some of the points made in those letters. I first appealed to the state board and to the NDE in 1997 to adopt an alternate set of English language arts reading standards, known as the NEEDS document. The Nebraska standards were very poor and provided standards for only grades 4, 8, and 12. Our efforts failed, and the board adopted the weak Nebraska standards. In 2008, the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, looked at all of our standards for the 4 subjects. They gave us basically 12 Fs. In 2008, I proposed the English Success Standards as a much better set of English standards. Even though the cost was 0, they were free, the NDE chose to stay with their very poor standards. I pointed out that Nebraska law, LB 1157, requires the standards adopted shall be sufficiently clear and measurable to be used for testing student performance. The Nebraska standards do not satisfy this requirement. The NDE spent $50,000 with Achieve and $50,000 with McREL to review the Nebraska standards. After spending $100,000, the Nebraska standards are still poor. Fordham gave the Nebraska English standards an F and the math standards a C in 2010. Why did the NDE send those standards to questionable Type 2 organizations like Achieve and McREL? I recommended that the NDE get a review from 5 recognized scholars and educators. They chose the number 2 person on my list. In the 2008 letter, I included an evaluation of the Nebraska standards by a real education expert. This person was an experienced classroom teacher who had been involved in numerous standards writing committees. The expert said the Nebraska standards were terrible. The timeline calls for presenting the first draft of the English standards to the board by January 2014. The process is running behind schedule. Over the last 6 months, I have testified 6 times to urge the board to adopt alternative standards. In Donalyn Rice's presentation yesterday, she said that 74% of the standards in the proposed document were drawn directly from the 2009 standards. That should tell you everything you need to know about these new standards. Fordham gave that document an F in 2010. Obviously, the NDE is sticking with the old approach of revising the existing standards, Type 2. By using a flawed foundation, more failure is sure to follow. The state board will vote today to release these standards to the public. The public will make some comments for several months. The NDE will collect and review those comments. They will make some token changes and submit the revised standards to the board. At one of the upcoming meetings, probably September, you will vote on whether or not to accept those standards. I'm guessing you will vote to accept. At that point, Nebraska will have very poor standards, and we will be saddled with those standards for 5 more years. I think it is a hopeless situation. Nebraska